My name is Yvonne Fenner. I'm the Executive Officer of the Court Reporters Board. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar on the Minimum Transcript Format Standards, or more simply known as the MTFS. To give you an idea of what we'll cover today, I will start out with a very brief history of the MTFS. We will take a look at the actual standards and also look at the sample formats. I will then talk about the consequences of a violation, and finally, we will look at where the MTFS applies. The MTFS became effective on February 10 of 2000. It was last modified in August of 2002. If the regulation has been in effect since 2000, you may be asking yourself, why should I care? The answer is twofold. First, the board continues to receive complaints of violations. And secondly, candidates taking the CSR license exam must comply with the MTFS in order for their test to be graded. So why exactly is the CRB such a stickler over its preferred format? I'll give you a hint with a riddle. What does gravity have in common with the MTFS? I know it's a bad joke, but it's the law. Well, technically, it's a regulation. What's the difference between a law and a regulation? For all intents and purposes, there is no difference. A regulation has the same force and effect as a law. Thus, the MTFS is not a guideline or a preference. It's the law. Let's take a look at the actual standards. Standard number 1 is no fewer than 25 typed text lines per page. The emphasis is on no fewer than. You may have 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, but you may not have anything less than 25. It's pretty straightforward, but can you think of any exceptions? There are two exceptions. The first one is the byline. The second one would be two-line parentheticals. This is an example of beginning a byline at the end of one page and starting the questioning on the next page. This is an example of a two-line exhibit parenthetical that is split between two pages. This is an example of a better practice, intentionally leaving a blank line in order to keep the necessary lines together. You can see it's intentionally left blank by the use of the hash marks on line 25. The second standard is that a full line of text shall be no less than 56 characters unless timestamping is used, in which case no fewer than 52 characters shall be used on a full line of text. Again, the emphasis here is no less than. Yes, most lines will have less than 56 characters, but if there is room on the line, it must be used. The third standard is timestamping may only be printed on a transcript under any of the following circumstances. The first one is when a deposition is videotaped. The second case is when requested by counsel on the record. And the third case is when a transcript will not have less than 56 characters per line. On the third instance, that comes into play when the deposition has ended and there is no stipulation on the record regarding the timestamping. But let's say one of the attorneys changes her mind after the fact, gives you a call, and says, "Hey, can you throw the timestamps in?" You absolutely may, but you may not shorten the line to 52 characters because you don't have that agreement on the record by counsel. So timestamps may be placed on the transcript in that case, as long as there are 56 characters per line. The fourth standard defines the left-hand margin as the first character of a line of text. This is not where the line number is, but rather it is to where the text would wrap. Standard number 5 is that each question and answer is to begin on a separate line. There's nothing tricky about this one. Standard number 6 is a two-parter. First, the text is to begin no more than 10 spaces from the left-hand margin. Additionally, the Q and the A symbols shall appear within the first 8 spaces from the left-hand margin. Again, it is the text that is to begin no more than 10 spaces, not the Q and the A. This is an example of a transcript that's in compliance with standard number 6. You can see that the Q symbol is on column 6 or space 6, and that the text begins on column or space 10. Standard number 7 requires that carryover Q and A lines begin at the left-hand margin. I'd like to throw in a proofreading note here, and that is that the word carryover is one word in the dictionary, but we have left it hyphenated as it is in the language of the regulation. This is an example of how fluid the English language is and how important it is to stay on top of changes. Standard number 8 refers to colloquy and paragraphed material. In both cases, it must begin no more than 10 spaces from the left-hand margin, with carryover colloquy going to the left-hand margin. Again, the emphasis here is on no more than 10 spaces. This is an example of a transcript that's in compliance with standard number 8. You can see on line number 5 that the colloquy is wrapping all the way to the left-hand margin. Standard number 9 deals with everyone's favorite, quoted material. Quoted material is to begin no more than 14 spaces from the left-hand margin, with carryover lines to begin no more than 10 spaces from the left-hand margin. This is an example of a transcript that's in compliance with standard number 9. You can see that the indented quotation begins on column or space 13, and that the carryover line wraps to column or space 10. Standard number 10 sets out that parenthetical and exhibit markings of 2 lines or more shall be no less than 35 characters per line. I'm sure you're beginning to catch on to the refrain of no less than. As you can see in this example, it's in compliance with standard number 10 because there are well over 35 characters in the first line. And the final standard, number 11, states that in colloquy, text shall begin no more than 2 spaces after the colon following the speaker ID. Again, emphasizing no more than 2 spaces. Now I want you to play along with me. You have just been hired as an enforcement analyst for the Court Reporters Board. The following transcript has been submitted by a complainant for your review for alleged violation of the MTFS. Let's see if we can find any career-limiting moves in the transcript. Here's the transcript that has been submitted for your review. I'm going to list the violations that occur, so feel free to pause the presentation if you need additional time. There's a violation of standard number 1 in that there are only 24 lines on the page. There's a violation of standard number 2 in that there are only 50 characters per line. We can see 2 violations of standard number 6. First, the text starts on column or space 15, and then the Q&A symbols are on column or space 10. There's a violation of standard number 8 on line 21. You can see that the carryover is incorrect. There's another violation of standard number 8 on line 7, where the indent is more than 10 spaces from the left-hand margin. There's also a violation of standard number 9 on line 17, where you can see the carryover issue. there's a violation of standard number 10 on line 22, where you can see that there are fewer than 35 characters on the line. And finally, there's a violation of standard number 11 on line 7. You can see that there are 4 spaces after the colon on the speaker ID. So now that you know what a violation looks like, what are the consequences? If you look at the California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Division 24, Article 8, Section 2473B states, failure to comply with these minimum standards as noted above constitutes grounds for disciplinary action. When you consider that this regulation has been in effect for well over a decade, what do you think some of the responses might be when we contact reporters who have violated the MTFS? The most common is actually, "Oh, I had no idea. I fixed it. It will never happen again. I'll let all my court reporting colleagues know I am sorry." In such a case, where there is little or no consumer harm, we may let it go or possibly issue a small fine. If, however, there are multiple offenses, we may issue a fine along with putting the licensee on probation. In the most egregious of cases, we hear, "It's not my fault. The firm made me do it, and I don't really care." In that case, we often have the reporter reformat the transcript and refund the difference. That would be in addition to a fine, possible probation, or even revocation of the license. So when does the MTFS apply? Let's take a look at the law. According to California Code of Regulations, Section 2473A, a reporter licensed under Chapter 13, Division 3 of the Code, and yes, that is all California CSRs, shall comply with the following transcript format standards when producing a transcript in a legal proceeding. The key here is legal proceeding. It goes on. If a reporter is employed by a court, either as an official or pro tem official reporter, the transcript format set forth by state or local rules of court, or adopted by that jurisdiction, if any, will supersede. And lastly, it states, if there are no transcript format guidelines established within a jurisdiction, the following minimum transcript format standards shall apply. Let's take a look at some specific applications. The first example, and a common question, is, if I take a federal depot, do I need to follow the MTFS? And the answer is yes, because it's a legal proceeding that does not have its own format. Another common question is, what about a deposition taken in California but venued in another state? The answer is yes, because it's a legal proceeding taken here in California, unless that state has established their own transcript format guidelines. The next example is a deposition taken by a California CSR, but in another state or even another country. The answer to that one is maybe. Yes, it's a legal proceeding, so the MTFS would apply, but you would need to see if that jurisdiction has adopted its own format. If it has not, then the MTFS would apply. If it does, that jurisdiction's format would supersede. And here's one that's a little more random for you. What about a case governed by the International Trade Commission? In this case, yes, the MTFS would apply because it is a legal proceeding that does not have its own format. In summary, I hope this is what you take away from this presentation. The MTFS is a law, it is not a guideline. As such, there is a consequence for a violation. The MTFS applies to all legal proceedings taken in California, no matter the jurisdiction, unless the jurisdiction has adopted their own format guidelines, just as is the case in California courts. And the most important part of the MTFS is the concept of M, or minimum. Thank you for taking the time to find out more about the MTFS. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact the board toll-free at 877-327-5272.